So good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Welcome to this very important webinar session. I'm Tony Schönenberger. I'm the Executive Chairman of STARS. And as many of you know, STARS is actually a platform for dialogue to discuss developments which will impact the society as a whole, but also our companies and institutions in the next couple of years. And in this context, I'm pleased to inform you that STARS is right now in the middle of preparing symposia in Singapore and in Switzerland, and also preparing study tours to Croatia and China, to Shenzhen and Guangzhou in Guangdong province. Please visit our website for more information. Today, we are continuing our webinar series on the circular economy. No doubt, this topic is extremely important for not only our businesses and institutions, but for our society as a whole. Today, we have the great privilege to talk to Sisse Norman Canguilhelm. Sisse, welcome to this webinar session. We are very much looking forward to your insights.
Thank you.
Sisse is a former Deputy Director of the Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So we have the chance and opportunity to also discuss geopolitical issues in the context possibly of sustainability. She's the EVP at Green Building Council here in Denmark, and she is a sustainability leader and strategic advisor. So again, thank you very much for joining this session. I want to introduce you now to our moderator, Gordana Kierans. Gordana is the managing partner of her consulting company in Croatia. She's supervisory board member of Circular Economy. She's the president of the STARS Southeast Europe Alumni chapter. And this chapter actually will be inaugurated in May of this year, combined with a STARS alumni study tour to Croatia. Please again visit our website for further information. Gordana designed this important series of 8 sessions on sustainability and the circular economy, and she's also moderating these sessions. So Gordana, once more, thank you very much, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Tony. It's my pleasure, of course, and it's my great pleasure to welcome Sisse. For our audience, Sisse and I both serve as Supervisory Board Member Circular Economy. So Sisse, a very warm welcome.
Thank you so much, Gordana. I've been looking forward to participating in this session.
To our audience, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to this next session of our webinar series, The Circular Economy, a Must for Business Leaders. Those of you who have attended before, you know the drill. You are very welcome to ask questions. I have the Q&A window open here in front of me, and I will read your questions to Sisse. Sisse, let's dive right in. And let's start with the elephant in the room. You're from Denmark, and Denmark is at the center of some geopolitical discussions. Fundamentally, we believe that you, as a former diplomat, 15 years of diplomatic work, that you have the inside view and, of course, the connection to your former network to tell us what really is happening right now geopolitically.
Thank you, Gordana, and thank you for addressing what you call the elephant in the room, but because it is definitely everything that is that we are talking about right now in the Danish and also very much in the European society. It is a very complex moment for Denmark and the people of Greenland. And I'll just briefly, because it's not everybody that knows the relation between Denmark and Greenland, so I'll just briefly say Greenland is an autonomous territory within the Kingdom of Denmark. It has its own government and control over most domestic affairs. Denmark, in consultation with Greenland, handles foreign policy, defense, and monetary matters. So I mean, part of the Kingdom of Denmark, but an autonomous territory. And we have been working together with the Greenlandic people for a long time, and we recently just had the elections in Greenland, and today the new government is going to be presented. As you most likely have heard, there's a lot of American interest in Greenland, to say it in a diplomatic way. And of course, this is a balancing act for the Danish and the Greenlandic government to talk to an ally about these new kinds of interest and ways to act. And I think what we see below, I mean, we have a government who starts to also push back quite a bit on the American administration. We have our ambassador in the US who's starting also when facts that are not entirely fact-based, so to speak, are put forward, we will push back now. I mean, that's a new way of handling things. So we are also getting a bit more direct, and I think a lot of European leaders are right now trying to see how do you manage the new administration without ending up in the Oval Office like it happened to one of our allies recently, and get a very undiplomatic treatment. So it's a fine balancing act. What I think when we look beneath these tendencies, we see, of course, some security issues about access to the sailing routes around Greenland and so on. But of course, we are also talking a lot about materials. And I figure this is also the connection you're thinking about, Gordana, because there are a lot of raw materials in Greenland that are extremely important to a lot of production. And of course, how do we handle this? And circularity and sustainability actually come in as one of the solutions to this, because naturally, if we can, in a more systemic way, handle circularity, we will be less dependent on these resources. So, I mean, in the long run, there's an immediate situation right now to handle, which is very an immediate threat in geopolitical terms, but there's also a much more long-term tendency of being independent and self-sufficient in a materials way. And this is where, and this is one of my point that I come back to often, we need to move from philanthropy to commercial interest. Circular economy and sustainability actions have to be commercially viable, because the minute we are hit by geopolitical realities like now, we tend to throw everything that is not core business overboard and just focus on this. So we need to make systemic change and put in frameworks so circular economy is the most economic viable solution. And this is how we get a long-term solution to this problem. That was quite a long answer to your question, but I firmly believe this is the way we have to go.
No, you're absolutely right. When you look at all of these conflicts at the surface, everything looks ethical, or this or that. We have all these narrative, but fundamentally underneath, it's always about resources, which we throw away, which is the bizarre thing about a world which we consider normal. So we have to turn the new normal that we actually don't fight over resources, that we preserve them better. And this is at the center of our webinar series, the circular economy. Denmark is also a leader in terms of the circular economy, or this is how we circular economy people perceive Denmark. The most famous example is, of course, the Kalundborg Symbiosis, which is a role model for industrial parks worldwide. China, I don't know how many hundreds, opened the hundreds of industrial parks in the country to follow the same principle. But Denmark still shines, or Kalundborg Symbiosis still shines as the best example, having world leaders inside. How is that? How much is the circular economy actually inside the Danish economy, inside the Danish industry, beyond Kalundborg?
Yeah, that is a very good question, Gordana. And just for our listeners who might not know into the detail the Kalundborg Symbiosis, I'll just briefly tell you what it's about. It's about 100 kilometers away from Copenhagen in a medium-sized town where 17 public and private companies has been working together on sharing excess water, energy, and materials for many, many years and have more than 30 streams between the partners. And it is, for example, excess steam from the heating plant, which is transferred to companies for cleaning and distillation. We have Novo Nordisk, the biggest Danish company who is working here. We have wastewater from the pharmaceutical production that is used as fertilizer. And we use cooling water that goes into the district heating because the temperature is higher and we need less energy. So there's like, I mean, more than 30 streams, and it has been working for many, many years. So that is a very good example. When you look into the Danish economy, the basic is still linear. And when we look, I mean, being with my with my background, I always look very much to the Ministry of Finance to see how are things valued, because we need to understand that we have different values than just the economic values that needs to be taken in to the national GDP. And the Ministry of Finance has actually, together with universities, developed a model for green GDP where you actually calculate the externalities from like destroying biodiversity, from using excess materials and so on, into an economic model. So you can actually see that we are damaging for 20 billion euros per year on, for example, biodiversity, where the missing link is that it is not calculated into the costs that the companies are paying to make their products. So I believe we have the overall understanding of the wider definition of value, that we cannot just go down into buy, sell, the linear function and throw away. So we have the model, but it's not been integrated into the economy broadly. And I think that is a huge missing link. To go again back to like moving from philanthropy towards a commercial way of doing sustainability, we have to pay the real price for not respecting the nature and the resources we have. And until that is into place, we will not see this systemic change. And I'll come back to this, Gordana, but we have Kalundborg, we have a lot of pilot projects. But as we have been discussing before, we don't need pilot projects. Of course, it's nice to begin with, but it's not the things that are going to make the systemic and big change. We need to integrate it into the business lines from the bottom and in all along the value chain.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I completely agree. We also, some of the things I'm passionate about is the communication. We use this term externalities, which is a very abstract term. We have to rephrase it because it's fundamentally cost for taxpayers. The forest is gone. There is soil erosion, whatever. There are all these disadvantages that actually taxpayers have to pick up the bill and take care of it.
And when you say this, just to come back on this, Gordana, when you see the World Economic Forum this year, I mean, the biggest challenges they see for the world is the lack of natural resources, is the lack of systems that can sustain a lot of the production, because 75% of the European loans are given to companies that are dependent on nature's services. So if we don't have it anymore, it's a real problem. It's just, I mean, it's a larger problem. And this, as you say, the value of having nature, both for the people and the more like health issues and so on, but it's also a hardcore economic problem. When we don't have it, people can't pay back the loans, and we have a new situation. So I really agree with you. It's not just externalities, it's much more profound than that.
Oh, it's way deeper. It goes way deeper than that. There is a European politician said once publicly, almost all of our resources come from Earth. And I went, wait a second, where does the rest come from? From the moon? Everything comes from Earth. I mean, apart from the sun energy that we use for electricity, everything else is from Earth. So we are, this is not a commodity. This is our dependency In Scandinavia, your neighbors are also very active. As Finland, of course, leading the race, with Sitra being extremely active in all parts of the society, including education, but also in the industry. Sweden, Norway. So what is the difference? What do you see in terms of Denmark and other Scandinavian countries?
Yeah, first of all, I think that the Nordic countries are, to a certain extent, quite similar in our approach to circular economy and collaboration in general. And just a fun fact, I mean, Swedes, Norwegians, and Danes understand each other's languages because we have been part of the same kingdoms previously. So we are more integrated than that some people might realize. And of course, those you're closest to, we had a lot of battles with Sweden and so on. It's almost the worst if the Swedes beat us in football. It's much worse than in a different country because they are our brother countries. So just for the background. No, but Finland is definitely very strong on the national circular strategies, and they take it a lot into education. Sweden is a very industrialized country. I mean, they have the car production. They have a lot of woods and so on, and they bring it into the industrial strength and innovation. And then Norway, again, of course, is exploring resource loops in oils and gas, which is really a central, it's a fundamental part of their economy. In Denmark, we really don't have a lot of natural resources compared to the other countries. And our approach, which is also embedded in the way we do politics in general, is very much in the cross-sector partnerships. We have a long history of public-private partnerships and a very big trust actually in the state compared to other countries, and a trust towards other, which makes it easier to advance partnerships. So just an example of this would be that just before the COVID crisis in 2019, the government, together with the biggest organization for companies in Denmark, launched the climate partnerships, where they went together in sectors. So, for example, the construction sector, the energy sector, and so on, and said, okay, to become a more sustainable country and sector, what do we need to do as a sector? How can we improve? What do we need the government to do? And what can the civil society do? So it was like going together instead of always saying, we need this regulation, which is also a big issue, but how can we all put together our efforts to move this forward? And I think that is a strength in the way we work. But we are also, again, back to when geopolitics hit, some things move in the background, and we really need to take this up. And I see an opportunity when you look at the European agenda right now, and you see the Draghi report saying something about European competition, and you see the clean industrial deal. There are matters in these initiatives that promote sustainability, and I believe it's our responsibility as industries and as thought leaders to show the solutions to the European Union and other, how this can work and present it, because it's not going to happen by itself. And in my experience, the best solutions always comes from the people doing it. So you have to move it up to the political agenda and show this can actually be done by the sector, and then you can make financial support and policy frameworks along that. But you need to take the specialist and the sector to the table to find the right solution. If not, you'll find solutions developed by me and my former bureaucratic friends whose school book and doesn't understand the sector. So it's really important that we get to the table and show the knowledge and the good cases that we have.
No, that one definitely, I completely agree. And the whole strength of industry as an argument is always helpful. Adds lots of voices. You mentioned, of course, the European. We have seeing, of course, major changes, rearmament. The investments in military are going, of course, to grab for the same resources as we need for the energy transition. So, or for anything else. So we are going to see here a lot of changes happening. But let's go back to the center of your work, the built environment, which you mentioned that working together. It's also the biggest emitter, so there's a lot of scrutiny on the work. So tell us about some good examples from the built environment that can illustrate that this is a business case.
Definitely. And just to let you know, like in many other Western countries, like a third of the CO2 in Denmark is emitted by the sector, a third of the resources is used by the sector, and almost 40% of the waste we have in the waste management comes from the sector. So there's a huge potential to do something here. We have, as I also said to you, quite a few pilot projects where we have companies going together and making, and companies from the entire value chain. So from the demolisher, which we are finding new names for because it's not demolishing, it's resource management, right? To the entrepreneur, to the investor and developer, banking and so on. And we have examples of villages built around Copenhagen where you have used recycled materials from other buildings. You are using bio-based materials, alternative heating and so on. And I think what has really been pushing this forward is an example of how it comes from the industry, because 12 years ago, the company where I work introduced the certification for sustainability in the built environment. It's German, it's called DGNB. Some of you might know it. And at that point in time, we asked people to calculate life cycle assessment, so the LCA that most of you will know. It was new to the sector. Nobody knew how to do it. We had a lot of training. And what was it? And we didn't talk about threshold at all. We were just learning how to do it. Fast forward 12 years down the line, we have now in the legislation nationally that the LCA limit is 7 kilograms per square meter. It is extremely ambitious. In many countries, it's around 40 kilos per square meter in general. So my point is, when the sector takes up, and that's why we have a lot of responsibility being the industry, try to develop methods to do things and get better, then we push it in to the legislation and it becomes a competitive advantage if you can actually do this. So I think we have new legislation coming now where you have to, it's selective demolishing, it's called, from 1st of July, where you have to resource map if you take down a building. And it's my vision and hope that this resource mapping will be, we can generate it like online on a database, so you can actually see in the entire country of Denmark what is going to be taken down, what's the quality of the materials, when is it going to be taken down, because a lot of the challenges in the Danish construction industry is the fragmented market, because when you take down a building and maybe you're not going to use the exact same thing in the next building you're going to make, and you have to store it and you have to handle it in the right way. If you can make a much more transparent market, you'll actually be able to circulate these materials faster. And we can see that companies who have succeeded, we have a company here called Neste that is building wood sheds for like in the city, in the backyard, you'll have a wood shed for your waste, for your bikes and so on. They have their company at the waste management or resource handling site, so they can take the materials directly out, so they have very little transaction cost. And it's something that's very scalable because there's a lot of wood coming out of this. So you really, but we need to be able to do this for everything. But it's something about reducing the handling cost, reducing the risk, and integrating the market.
You address so many topics. I think we could talk for an hour just about.
I know. People often say you're a woman of many words, and yeah.
No problem at all. No, you just got me thinking, because you're mentioning transparency, and of course the secondary materials which are taken. I wouldn't say demolished because it's a negative word, as you said. That they are collected somewhere. So how much is Denmark actually investing in infrastructure? I consider infrastructure a major enabler for circularity, because we need to bring the secondary materials from A to B where they're needed. As you said, the next building next door might not need all of that, so it has to go somewhere else. So how much is happening in terms of infrastructure investment?
I think the resource mapping that is going to be mandatory very soon is going to be the first step in this agenda. And what I see is also a lot of small startups who can see the logic in providing platforms from this. Again, I don't know how it is in other countries, but the IT solutions provided by the industry is often a lot more competitive than the ones provided by the government. And this is said in a very diplomatic way because, wow,
Yes.
we have a lot of data platforms that are not working coming from public side in Denmark. So what I see is they put in place the legislation on resource mapping. You have small companies, bigger companies making the platforms. This is going to create the infrastructure that is needed. And I always prefer to see the private sector doing this because it's going to be more competitive. So from the Danish government's point of view, it's a focus, but not at all to the extent that it should be. Putting in place the legislation is going to help this. And when I look a bit down the line, the Circular Economy Act and so on coming from the EU, I see a lot of positive notes. But I'm not. I would love to say like we are on the way and huge investments are made. This is not the case, and I think quite a few companies also, in Danish you'd say, burned their fingers a bit from the CSRD and the Omnibus Act, having developed big platforms to be able to handle these requirements, seeing them rolled back. I mean, I think there's a logic to the Omnibus package, but the way it's been done has definitely not been helping transparency and believe in legislation, unfortunately.
That's true, and taking the sustainability seriously, because you can cheat your way out if you just put enough pressure. No, that's definitely the topic. We are coming towards the end. Our audience hasn't been asking questions, so I'll continue. When we look at education, is there anything being done in terms of education?
I mean, I'll start in the built environment very much. We have a lot of, especially architects and engineers, having entire educations, like 5 years master programs focusing on this. And the young people we get here in the company on this are just amazing. They have a lot of knowledge, a lot of will, a lot of purpose-driven matters. What has been a bit surprising is that the vocational training is not at all formed for this yet. So you have a disconnect between design, investment, demands in the tenders, and the ability to handle it on the ground, which is something that we are addressing politically in order to because all parts of the value chain need to do this. So in overall, there's a lot and new, like also on the political studies and economic studies, you have new books on the value creation, which is not purely economic. So I think a lot of good things are happening, but we definitely need to get the vocational training much more on a circular and sustainable agenda.
That's true. We do have one question from Professor Jörg Hofstetter. How is the Pact 4 skills of the EU coming in here in training?
How is the what, sorry?
Pact 4 skills of the EU.
I am not aware of this pact. The pact for training. Sorry.
Me neither. Jörg, if you wouldn't mind, would you mind writing a word or two? But yes, you're right, because we have the challenge that we are going to repair them. Is vocational training lost completely its importance in the society due to technology and all of that? Jörg sent a link, and it's about get public and private organizations together, encourage them to make concrete commitments to upskilling, reskilling needs, advice on relevant funding instruments, partnership opportunities.
But this this sounds extremely relevant, and it's not my expertise, but I would definitely, coming back also to the partnership approach from Danish side, I believe this would definitely be something they're looking into, or at least should be looking into, because it's extremely important.
Yeah, no, and you mentioned entrepreneurs earlier as well. I mean, we have to also put quite a bit of money behind the entrepreneurship to also provide an alternative to current companies. One last question, Sisse. What is your vision for Denmark, for the circular economy in Denmark? And for our audience, of course, the leaders of the next generation, what concrete steps should they take today to get to there?
My vision is definitely that you pay the actual price that things cost. I mean, that's back to my first line. We have to look at we have to have a holistic approach to value. And if I was a company, I would do one of the big pension funds in Denmark is having a shadow budget, I think they call it, where they calculate, okay, so this investment in offsite biodiversity cost this. If the green GDP was to be ruling, our investment would have this return rate, because we would actually be taking into consideration. So I think in order to move something along, have a budget where you take in the real cost of materials in regard to the things we've been mentioning previously. So I mean, we have to look at the real costs. I think that would be the point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Let's include also everyone, understand the whole system and everybody involved in the supply chain. I completely agree. Sisse, thank you so much for your insights. Of course.
Thanks for having me.
That's so valuable. If anybody wants to reach out, where do they find you? Is LinkedIn an option, or very?
Definitely.
That's the best. Okay, thank you so much, Sisse, for joining us today. Our audience, thank you for joining us again. Thank you, Jörg, for the question. In 2 weeks, we are off to North America. We will look at circular transition there and the progress despite some setbacks. And of course, for those of you who observed the Holy Month, I wish you a beautiful, joyful, and blessed Eid holidays. All the best.